I've just watched a clip of the famous scene in the film Full Metal Jacket near the start of the film with Gunnery Sergeant Hartman um, sort of yelling at troops. For those of you who don't know, the film Full Metal Jacket was a famous Vietnam War film, an outstanding film, a very, very powerful film, made in 1989. But the character of Sergeant Hartman was basically sadistic, um, sort of really thuggish gunnery sergeant. And in the start of the film, he's sort of seen coming out with the most creative and insulting sort of diatribes against the recruits. Now, no one's suggesting that that's exactly like real life, but um, anyway, that scene has been parodied many times, and Sergeant Hartman is possibly the most famous character in the film. Um, he particularly bullies a character called Gomer Pyle, who's overweight, and in the end, that ends in a scene where Gomer Pyle kills both him and himself. And this is all in Parris Island, South Carolina, in the training stage leading up to the Vietnam War, or I should say their deployment. Very powerful film. That's fiction, but some of the circumstances around that, leaving aside all the sort of satire and the way that film's been, what's the word I'm looking for, mimicked and so on, parody, that's the word I'm looking for. There's some real issues with this in the military. I've just come across, because after that I decided to Google army bullying, and what I came across was Donnie Chen. He was a young American soldier, 19, Chinese American soldier, who took his own life whilst deployed in Afghanistan. He took his own life. Subsequently, 8 fellow soldiers were arrested on suspicion that they had directly contributed to his death. One of them a senior commander for failing to act. The other 7, I think, were fellow privates. I'll put a link to that news report, but it includes an allegation that they threw rocks at him, hurled racial abuse. This guy is Chinese American. Dragged him across the floor. And I cite Donnie Chen as a particular case, but there's many, many cases like this. In the UK, we've had a notorious case called Deep Cut Barracks, where no fewer than four army recruits took their own lives. Again, with the allegations of bullying being directed at that barracks. In Russia, the problem is endemic. And I'd like to just weigh in on a few of my thoughts here. By the way, in the Russian case, that's been widely chronicled. Even Russia Today, which surprised me, even they documented it. I'd like to just put in a few of my thoughts on this one. Firstly, some of the excuses. People say that soldiers have to be tough because they could be in a life or death situation on the battlefield. And people come out with things like, oh, how are they going to handle a hostage situation? Well, no one disputes that soldiers have to be well trained. No one disputes that soldiers have to be tough individuals, resourceful, tough. And no one is suggesting that soldiers should be wrapped in cotton wool. That would not be practical, because clearly it's not a normal job. I think it does take tougher skin than other jobs would take. But people are confusing that with what these cases are, which is specific, relentless bullying of individuals. Now, let's be clear about this. I'll cite the UK and the US as examples, because in those militaries, that's not conscription, they are professional armies, whereby the people who are serving are professional soldiers who have chosen to join the army. Yes, you can argue they're maybe young and naive and have been coerced into it or whatever. Um, but they're professional soldiers, okay? So they know the army life is tough, but no soldier would voluntarily want to be bullied in that way. Um, when someone joins the army, they know it's going to be a tough life. They're not stupid. They know that. But what we are talking about here is relentless, merciless bullying of an individual, targeted bullying. That is not the same as preparing someone. Um, and in the case of Donnie Chen, that took place in Afghanistan. People are going to say, oh, these were, referring to the bullies, these were frightened young men who were reduced to these sort of this sort of behaviour. Well, that's the same excuses that were made for the troops at My Lai in Vietnam. Um, by the way, just so no one misinterprets this, I'm not anti-soldiers. I'm not a pacifist, and this isn't an anti-soldier video, so please don't misinterpret it that. If anything, it's a pro-soldier video because these are not weak people. These bullying victims, they're not weak people. They chose to join a tough job. And in most cases, if not all cases, they probably put up with that and put up with it and put up with it. But I challenge anyone, I don't care how tough you are, to face that sort of relentless bullying and then not be under psychological pressure. And if you say you can hack it, you're just a liar. Um, what we have here is there's a lack of universal approach. Now, if it's true that there was racist abuse hurled at him, don't tell me every soldier's going to face that, because they clearly won't. White Americans aren't going to face that sort of bullying. An Asian American will stand out. So that is specific bullying. Um, and it's not about building camaraderie. It's not about toughening people up. I strongly believe that I'm not naive. I know soldiers need to be trained, and it isn't like a normal job. But it sickens me that there's people trying to make excuses for this. And I think the army's response, and you'll see it in that video, was very pathetic. It was basically, it's inappropriate. The spokesman said, if we find so-called hazing is happening, then that's inappropriate. Inappropriate doesn't sum up what's going on. And this isn't an isolated case, it's happened many times. Same in Britain. And like I say, in Russia it's endemic. Those are the three countries that I've heard of a lot of cases, but it wouldn't surprise me if this takes place in every single military on earth. Wouldn't surprise me at all. And the idea that you have to be bullied in order to be tough is just a caveman thinking. You can train soldiers to be tough, disciplined, resourceful without that sort of individual focus. And it depresses me. My heart goes out to their families. These were patriots. These people are patriots fighting for the country. And the last thing they were driven to their suicide by cowardly bullies. And yes, I do use the word cowardly because if a gang of people attack an individual, I don't care who they are. I don't care if they're wearing a uniform. That's an act of cowardice. Because it isn't evil, even. It's not one-on-one. That's an act of cowardice in itself. And like I say, I don't want people to misinterpret this. I'm not anti-soldier at all. But I will condemn those soldiers who engage in this sort of behaviour. And again, being frightened young men is not an excuse. Because every soldier goes through fear, but not every soldier resorts to that. The responsibility lies entirely in the senior management. because they're not enforcing it. Clearly, they're not enforcing it. Their excuses wear thin, because this is happening all the time. Now, you can argue that the high rate of army suicides may be due to other reasons, like maybe losing comrades in the battlefield and so on, and maybe mental health is an area that really needs to be evaluated in terms of veterans. I believe that is an area that needs to be seriously evaluated, but without a doubt, some of those suicides will be resulting directly from bullying, um, and it really, really pisses me off. These are brave men, and in some cases brave women, serving their country, and it really, really bugs me. But what's worse is when people make excuses for it. You know, they say, oh, well, how are they going to be prepared for a hostage situation? But the difference is, in a hostage situation, they know who the enemy is. Um, they don't expect to be killed by their own side. And when someone commits suicide in those circumstances, that is pretty much manslaughter, because you can say they've done it at their own hands, but months, possibly years in some cases, of harassment, of constant specific bullying, no one, doesn't matter how tough you are, can put up with that without some sort of effect on mental health. And if you say otherwise, you're just an idiot. If you don't believe me, I'll extend this to civilian life. We had a case in the UK where a woman was harassed for years by gangs. She ended up committing suicide. So that's proof that people can be driven to that. The fact this guy was a soldier doesn't mean that he's not human. Soldiers are human beings, and you cannot create robots. And if someone is bullied to that extent, then of course they're going to get to a point where they want escape, and that's what suicide ultimately is. In their mind, that's what it is. Um, I hope the soldier's responsible. This is December last year, so I'm not sure what's happened since then. I hope the individual's responsible. Personally, I honestly believe they should get a court-martial followed by a dishonourable discharge, or whatever they call it. It sickens me, and there's no excuses. There's just not. Because to make the life of one of their comrades much harder when that comrade is facing exactly the same pressure they are is despicable. It's almost like if you think of an industrial strike when workers decide to go back to work or something like that. It's almost like rubbing salt into the wound of, you know what I'm trying to say. It really sickens me, and every army has to take this seriously, and they have to differentiate between preparing people who are battle ready, which may be impossible whatever way you do it, but look, I'm not a soldier, I don't know what army life's like, but I am a human being, and I'm talking about fellow human beings here. You know, no matter how tough a soldier is, they're human. And that sort of specific bullying is going to drive someone over the edge. And I believe it's endemic within most armies. And the same applies, by the way, to other uniformed services, the police, the fire brigade. I think bullying's big problems in there as well. This is bullying. There's a big difference between preparing soldiers, preparing police, etc., for what is a very tough job and far from a normal job, and specific bullying. You know, there's no universality about this. It's not like every soldier was had rocks thrown at them and was dragged across the ground. This happened to this one guy, and I'm not a particularly religious person. I just hope he's in a better place. All the same, shocking. Okay, let me know your thoughts. My conclusion is that armies across the world have to stop making excuses and start taking this issue seriously, because all they're doing is they're losing potential recruits anyway this way.